I don't have a hat. I don't have a hat to match yours. Greetings YouTube, welcome back to the Commadenr channel. I am Marcus, and of course the lovely gentleman on top of me, well, not necessarily a gentleman, he's the commander. Commander not necessarily have to be a gentleman, and they probably should also. Oh, never mind, that's terrible.
What's up amigos, Commander Jaime here today. Glad to be on the collab over here with Meta-Nerds, so I'm excited to talk about Maelstrom.
Yeah, Maelstrom Reverse. Who would have missed that it's going to be Maelstrom Reverse for the clan collection this time?
I know, right? I'm excited because it has beautiful art.
So for the new clan selection, we actually have, of course, Maelstrom Reverse, and the other two cards being Valeria. I can't really pronounce her name because it's either Valerie or Valeria. Valeria, of course. One being Valeria, as well as Cobalt Wave. Now, Cobalt Wave not necessarily has to be in the Maelstrom deck, because I think, as well as Commander Jaime thinks, it's its own deck due to how selfish it is.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Anyways, let's start with the first cadet, Tier Knight Valeria. Two skills, continuous rearguard circle. During the battle this unit attack, if it is the fourth battle of that turn, this unit gets power plus 10k. Second skill, auto Vanguard and rearguard. When this unit attack hits a Vanguard, if it is the third battle of that turn or more, choose one of your opponent's rearguard and retire it. If it is the fourth battle of that turn or more, draw a card. This card is basically a more power-up version of the OG Valeria, because the OG Valeria, if I'm not mistaken, only works when she's attacking at the fourth turn and above, and she only retires one. So not only does this card gives you the power-up, it also gives the retiring as well as the draw, which the OG one lacks. This is basically much better. Of course, the art is much better than the old one. This one you could basically see that's one very nice gun. I'm trying not to be a simp here, but yeah, that's a very nice gun. And yes, this card works well with everything. Whatever deck that you want, yeah, it works well with everything. It's not like specific to one kind of deck, so it's actually really nice that we can have something that gains power, because opponents getting damage trigger really suck for Aqua Force. Well, maybe except Valios.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that contributes a lot more is in Valios, because Valios does swap a lot of units and relies on that strategy. So just having standalone beaters on top of like Coral, Assault, and Riptide, this really helps in that regard too. So the biggest thing too with other units that need to hit like fourth battle, like Tetra is a good example too, where the rearguard needs to attack, and if you have something that's big enough, that helps with damage as well. Tetra Drive suffers the issue of having a power-up boost, whether it be the rearguard or the Vanguard attacks too, so it lets you kind of like not have to worry as much about that alongside with Coral Assault. Favas, I feel like you still have to rely on the consistency of resting your units so you're able to do Lambros, so this might not be well suited for Favas, but you could always try it out. Maelstrom we'll talk about later in the deck list and how many ratios that works out, but it is definitely applicable. And then Revon as well, this could be, you know, a unit that helps with the as well with those battles too, but you need to have an Excel circle at least to get to the fourth battle, or 2 Excel circles to make it easier at that point too.
At this point of time, I think everyone already knows the Maelstrom Reverse skill, so even if they no guard this unit attack hits, it does not really matter because none of their rear guards are gonna survive.
Yeah, that's true. You pretty much would only get the draw at that point too. The other way to look at it too, like when you attack with reverse and you still have a standing rear guard, you could at least put the triggers onto this unit if it's still standing. So it's actually, they PG Karma, a reverse Maelstrom, and then after this they still have to deal with some kind of beater at least.
Would you say this is one of the top attackers for the deck?
I see it almost like a backup because the deck already has Fencer, which is actually a bigger beater, and it's a lot more reliable too. And we can even talk about that more in depth with the deck list. But this definitely helps in that regard if you want more beaters too. Okay,
so that's basically it for this card. We're moving on to the next one, which is Cobalt Wave Dragon. There's multiple skills here, so yeah. Well, just the two. Auto Vanguard Circle. When your rearguard attack this unit plus 5k until the end of that turn. Very plain and very simple. Second skill, Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks, counterblast one and perform all of the following according to this unit's power. 25k or more, this unit gets critical +1 until the end of turn. 30k or more, you may switch all of your rearguards between the front row and the back row. 35k or more, all of your front row rearguards get 10k power until the end of turn. This basically feels like Dimension Police Aqua Force.
It really does. I think it's very unique too, because it really makes you think like how many battles can you get before the Vanguard attacks. And what's really cool is that not only that the Vanguard gets bigger and it gets crit, you're able to switch around your formation and also potentially give more power to your front row units too. So that way you can still have rearguards to attack with, which is not as common in Aqua Force. It's usually one way or the other or some kind of in between. And I think this has the best of both worlds.
This card does feels like the Grade 4 Tavas that basically gains power every time a rearguard attack, and then there's like a guard restrict if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Wailing Thalas. Yep.
Okay, so the first card that actually works well with Cobalt Wave, actually the first two cards, because we all know what these two cards does. By using these two cards skill, you're basically giving Cobalt Wave a 20k power up after they attack and of course after their skill.
Yes, you can do Terrific Coil first, so that way it guarantees restand, and then you can do Tidal Assault. It'll lose power, but at that point, if you're using to beef up Cobalt Wave, then it pays for itself. And then you can still like depend on the remaining riggers that you have formation 2 wise. So these are excellent cards to like help with that number 2. I know that somebody on Reddit had mentioned too, Diamantes is a grade 3 that also restands, so that might be another card to have as a backup grade 3. So it's just another restander to help with these numbers too.
Of course, we all know that these two cards has been reprinted in this set and the last, so there's no reason for you to say, oh, I don't have these two cards. No. It's reprinted. Go get them.
Yeah, and Terrific Coils are pretty cheap.
Okay, so the next card we have is actually, I kind of forgot this card name again.
Apollos. It's a promo.
I think this card was reprinted in this set, or am I wrong?
I don't remember actually.
Is it reprinted? I don't understand. Probably the video editing me will answer that question. This card could actually give the extra 10k power to Cobalt Wave should you not have a lot of your key pieces, for example Tidal Assault as well as Terrific Coil. The extra 10k power could make Cobalt Wave bigger, as well as of course achieve most of his skill by the time you actually attack with Cobalt Wave. Don't worry too much of the retire part, because well, Cobalt Wave is gonna basically carry the whole deck. And of course the last card is of course going to be Propulsion Dragon. Now Propulsion Dragon here is of course going to be either your first 2 attacks, depending on if you have Terrific Coil or Tidal Assault, because Propulsion Dragon will go to the back row after you use his skill, and he's going to be a restanding part. And since Cobalt Wave skill allows you to switch your front row and your back row, this means that you actually get an extra attack with Propulsion Dragon, which is actually not bad. And on top of that, Propulsion Dragon also gets a 10k. So essentially Propulsion Dragon could be attacking for 13k the first time, 23k the second time when Propulsion Dragon attacks. So it's actually synergized quite well, and you definitely have a lot of toys to play with Cobalt Wave.
I think you hit the pretty good points. Like Apollos is a really good pick because it's one of those cards that actually give power to the Vanguard. I know we use this in Tetra Drive as well for V Premium, so it makes it a lot more threatening for the Vanguard. And then, you know, if you do get to hit, it's a bonus. You get to draw a card. One tip to use it, you can put it behind the Vanguard, so that way when you swap your rear guards, it doesn't matter because it's behind the Vanguard at that point, and you still get the benefit of the power up. And then with Propulsion Dragon, I think that's a really good synergy because you can keep swapping. I don't think Propulsion Dragon's once per turn, is it? Oh, it is once per turn, but you know, it's still another card that can get power or just whip with columns in a much easier sense too as well.
This card is basically an auto PG from your opponent, if that's correct.
Yeah, because at that point they're gonna take 2 crit at least, and if you do play a lot of crits, it could be 3 damage or 4 damage pretty easily.
In any case, this card is basically going to be his own deck. Now, whether or not, I don't think he will be as good as the other deck, but of course, it's still quite early to make that judgment. Maybe some people will make it work, and he's going to be like the best deck in the whole Aqua Force. But
yeah,
then,
who knows?
who knows? Yeah, who knows? But then, of course, once we go through the reverse, I don't think Cobalt Wave stands a chance. Blue Storm... Blue Storm Combo Dragon, Maelstrom reverse. We already see this coming. It's definitely here. It's just a matter of time that he's gonna show his face. If Maelstrom reverse does not appear in this set, the next set will most probably be him.
Right, absolutely.
This is gonna be tiring. The skill is so long. Auto Vanguard Circle. At the end of the battle that your rearguard attacks, if that attack did not hit, lock one of your stand rearguards, and this unit gets 10k until the end of turn. If you have a card with Maelstrom in its card name in your soul, choose one of your opponent's rearguard and retire it. Second skill, auto Vanguard circle. When this unit attacks, if it is the 4th battle of that turn or more, cost counterblast 1 and this unit gets critical +1 and drive +1 until the end of turn. At the end of that battle, if that attack did not hit, for each of your lock cards, your opponent choose a card from their hand or rearguards and put it into the drop. Whew.
Wow, you said that pretty well.
So, yeah, this is potentially going to be the best reverse of this set.
It's one of my favorites for sure at this point too. I think it makes sense to talk about maybe Maelstrom with it.
Yeah. Speaking of Maelstrom.
So what's funny, I know Commadenr and I were talking beforehand. It's funny because it has the opposite problem, where the OG Maelstrom wanted you to hit the 3rd or 4th battle to be able to restand. Now Karma cares about you not hitting. So sometimes you may have to think your mentality a bit backward in sense, do I want to attack with rearguards that literally cannot hit just to get other rearguards locked and give power to the Vanguard, and then potentially being able to retire your opponent's rearguards if you do have a Maelstrom in the Sol. And as an added benefit is that when it attacks, you have this extra crit and drive that you can also further stack with another card such as Press Strain, which gives additional drive, so you can have potentially, you know, quad check or even quintet checks pretty easily if you do have enough counterblast per se for that. And if they do guard it at that point, you're also forcing them to discard, which it's almost like a Nubatama effect. So if you are the type of person that likes to like have that resource attrition fight, you can get rid of their rearguards and you can get rid of their hand, and still, like, even though your rearguards didn't hit, you technically took a lot of resources from your opponent still overall, which I think is a really cool way to see it in that respect too.
Remember, it's all in the name. If you're questioning or not why your reverse is weird or bad in a sense, it's all in the name, reverse. Whether or not the reverse of good is bad, I don't know.
That's hilarious.
In the case of whether or not you want to ride into the OG Maelstrom or not, you could, but then keep in mind is that reverse himself actually makes a decent right target for your turn 3, regardless whether or not you go first or second, because regardless of whether or not your opponent has rearguards, when the time you ride into your grade 3, your opponent is still gonna drop their hands or retire their rearguards anyway.
That's true.
So it is still a really, I would say, very threatening ride, regardless if you ride into the OG Maelstrom or Maelstrom reverse.
Yeah, and it may shine more in certain matchups too. I think one of the ones that were pointed out was Night Rose and Pale Moon, where they take away the rearguards in some form or fashion. So if you do ride this as turn 3, you're able to like start discarding their hand in that sense. If they do like PG it, they're losing 2 cards from that, and then if they lose like 3 more cards outside of what you already have attacks going on, then it's a benefit in that regard. I think one of the biggest things that's different with Glory, when you do a Glory turn, if you do get a damage trigger from your opponent and they're still like at 4 or 5 damage, it really hurts that turn to close. But with Karma, you don't really have that fear, because if you do hit and they do get a damage trigger, then your other rearguards just won't hit, which you'll still get the benefit of locking and powering up your Vanguard, and then still have the threat pressure of discarding cards from their hand.
There are, of course, other cards that you might consider running with Maelstrom reverse, other than, of course, Maelstrom dedicated support. I mean, there's a lot then which support this card. Those 2 cards, as mentioned, is going to be Tidal Assault and Terrific Koi. Yeah, very original.
Very original. Yeah.
Now, the reason why you would want to run Tidal Assault or Terrific Coil is because these 2 actually restands when they attack. Of course, this depending on the first turn or the second turn, whatever restriction they have. If the attack these 2 are dishing out, it does not hit, you can basically just relock them instead of like your back row. Of course, locking your back row is probably going to be your best option here. However, should you have other attackers that you might favor more, for example, a Coral Assault, you definitely do not want to lock that Coral Assault, right? So it's actually a much better choice for you to lock Tidal Assault or Terrific Coil themselves, because they are standing at the end of their battle.
They stand immediately, so you're able to do the skill too, regardless of which way too. you can start seeing it as like, oh, I can do a Soul Blast 1 to lock my card, in a sense.
And of course, since we all know Tidal Assault does minus power after his skill, so yeah, he's not gonna do much
anyway at that point.
Yeah. And of course, something to keep in mind here is that this, of course, reverse being reverse, he has some very weird synergy which you do not want. Well, not at this point, it's not really called a synergy anymore. It's more like you do not want to activate their skill when you go into reverse. Those two cards being Elfina and Radiate Assault, if I'm pronouncing their name right. These two cards will enable their attack, or rather Maelstrom attack, to regard as attack hit, even if your opponent PG or something. As mentioned before, Maelstrom reverse is reverse of Maelstrom. This is going to be very confusing. Anyways, you really don't want your Maelstrom to attack hit, because the attack not hit is going to be very devastating for your opponent. I mean, even if Maelstrom reverse attack hit, they're still gonna take 2 damage to the face. That's still, in a sense, a good, but if it does not hit, it's more devastating.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, because like you want it where it's a lose-lose situation for your opponent, because if they do take the hit, they take at least 2 damage, and then with the Maelstrom deck, it actually deck thins really efficiently. So more than likely, you are going to see triggers, and especially if you do see a crit, you can win it from 3 damage at that point too, if it does hit. But with Radiant Assault and Alpida, just like, you know, if you technically didn't hit, it counts, but it doesn't benefit you in any way. So it's like, you got to watch out for these cards. And one tip with Radiant Assault is that, you know, it has to either attack or has to boost the unit that it attack. And so you can use the skill to still get the benefit of returning Maelstroms and drawing cards. Just have it be one of those units that gets locked in general. So that way you don't have to worry about that. And then with Alpida, you just don't pay the counterblast for her skill. That's literally what her skill does. So you just benefit from her being at least a 14k attacker, and of course a 10k shield from her skill. So
from your testing, normally how many cards is being locked by the time Maelstrom reverse attack?
Yeah, generally it's anywhere from 2 to 3 cards, and I use no restanders with the current build, but if you do restanders, you might be able to get away with 4. Because the biggest thing is you still need to get to the 4th battle, and ideally you want to stand in rearguard after the Karma attack, because that way you can still take advantage of the triggers, and especially if you use press string to get like quad check and quintet checks. You're gonna want to stack those if it doesn't hit, because more than likely they're gonna PG Karma all the time, unless they just take it. This card alone might just push Aqua Force into the meta, the top dogs in the meta. I agree. The Maelstrom deck is already solid too, so it just adds more to its arsenal. With that out of the way, so this is probably this of course is the sample deck list that Commander Jaime used for his testing. This, I think, is the 2nd iteration of the deck. I mean, the first iteration is just basically tweaking some of the ratios of this card. I think he's pretty much set in stone on what the other cards they are going to play within this card. Yeah, definitely. So I will leave the deck thought process to you in this point, because I have literally 0 idea on how to run Maelstrom. Yeah, no worries. I could definitely do that. So, well, first things first, I want to give credit where credit is due. This mostly came from Zay as well. He's a writer on the Axis Vanguard and Force of the Ocean blogs. And also, I want to give credit to Kagze, that actually recently topped for the Bro for V Premium in the NA. He actually took Maelstrom, he did really well too. So it's just that having that mentality that Maelstrom before Karma is a very solid deck. And another thing that you have to think about is the Heal Guardians. One of the weaknesses for Maelstrom was dealing with glory turns with 20k shields or greater. And that's in the original heals, or even like crit sentinels or PGs. But now that everybody's using those Heal Guardians that are now 15ks, glory becomes a lot scarier. So the deck itself before Karma now is already solid. So you can start viewing Karma as really an addition as to another option as a finisher. So you still want to have to keep the core, such as the OG Maelstrom, at 4 copies, because you're able to do a restanding turn on turn 3. And so you just need to make sure that you technically hit the 3rd or 4th battle. And if you do hit it naturally, that's great, but you have cards like LPD on the very right, the grade 2, and then Radiant Assault as the 2nd to the bottom left, that help you guarantee that attack by either a Soul Blast or a Counter Blast. So that's still very important, and that's why these cards are still at 4. to make sure that turn 3 is important. And what it does, it's also a setup turn for your turn 4. And to help with that even more, if you go to the very right, we have another grade 2 that's Press Stream that's still at 4. This is the card that where you can counterblast, discard a Maelstrom, you can get an additional 10k to your Vanguard and an additional drive. And if you open with multiple of these, you can just pop them onto the field and just pay counterblast and discard those Maelstrom copies, and you can go easily to triple, quintet, quadcheck or quintet drive in that sense, and you restand. So you'll get to +1 for every drive that you use with Press Stream. So it really sets up for your turn 4 really well. So then either you have Karma or you have Glory. I feel like the ratios can be flexible. You can have 3 Karma and 2 Glory, or you could have 2 Karma and 3 Glory. It just really depends on your metagame, and so I recommend play testing them. You want to make sure you have that consistency still. And it's like, okay, how do I get these Maelstrom copies to my hand? That's why we still have cards like the grade 2 that's on the most left is Fencer. Fencer, when it's placed onto Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, you could check the top 7 for a Maelstrom and add it to your hand. It's a soft +1. Super beneficial too. And then when it attacks the 4th battle or more, it gets +15k. It's literally Coral Assault, but just for Maelstrom, because it does check for the Maelstrom name. As your deck filtering, you have other grade 1s as you ride up to that can potentially look for those Maelstroms too. So if you have the one grade 1 that's the second to the left from the grade 1 slots, it's Analyze Shooter. And Analyze Shooter is a booster that when the attack that it boosted hits, you can Soul Blast 1, discard any card, and then grab 2 different types of Maelstrom. So you could instantly search for Glory and Karma at the same time if you want to. And now your opponent's put it in a situation, it's like, oh, is he gonna do Glory next turn? Or is he gonna do Karma next turn, you know? Or it's coming at that point too. And then you have cards such as the Bubble Coral over here on the right. It's a 1-up because there's only so much room that I was trying to tweak with too. And if it hits when it boosts, you can check the top 7 for a +1 for a Maelstrom copy. So it just helps with the consistency of deck knitting, getting your pieces, especially Maelstrom, because you rely on writing the right Maelstrom, and then your Press Stream discards it as well. And really with the addition of Valeria over here on the bottom left, she's just another beater. So this is what I was talking and alluding to earlier in this video, is that she's kind of like the backup for Fencer, where Fencer is the bigger beater, and they both see the 4th battle to be able to get that power up. And so she serves as a backup. More than likely, you're not gonna get a benefit from the on-hit retire skill, because if you do Karma and you already have a Maelstrom in your soul, then it's gonna actually just retire pretty much the board at that point. And if you do hit, then you get a draw, which is fine and appreciated at that point too. But you appreciate more with Fencer to see that happen too. I think with Glory turns, Valeria has also helpful in that sense too. And if you already set up with other fields, Glory turns become a little more solid too, because the biggest thing that hurts Glory is really triggers that are damage check. And if your opponent is not at 5, you don't necessarily know if you can seal the deal. And what's really cool with Karma is that if your opponent's at low damage, it doesn't matter if they do good damage triggers, because if your attacks don't hit, then it just makes Karma even scarier. And if they do take Karma's hit, they go from low damage to potentially high damage, or even just lose because of the amount of crit pressure that it has. So you have ways for those scenarios in both. And so with Glory, it's just very important for both these 2 cards to be turn 4 in my eyes, because then you have a second Excel circle. And with Karma too, you need rearguards to lock and you need rearguards to attack. So having an additional Excel circle really helps with that inflexibility too. Even if you call a trigger just to have a body just to lock, it's still appreciative in that respect too. And just to help with the resources a little bit too, we still have the Penguin Soldier over here at the bottom. So, you know, the 4th battle happens when another unit attacks, you can retire it and countercharge. This actually plays really well with the Karma. Karma has to be 4th battle or more. So right when you attack with Karma, you can retire the Penguin, get a countercharge, then use the same counterblast to pay for Karma in that respect too. The triggers, it's pretty standard. You want to make sure you have your heals, you want to make sure you have your draw PGs, and you want to make sure you have your crits to have that crit pressure. I don't think front triggers are really as valuable with Karma, because you do have to have those battles beforehand, and more than likely you're going to have at least 1 rearguard still standing after Karma attacks. So front triggers don't make sense at that point. You can make an argument for Glory, but at that point you may just want to attack 1 Karma or no Karma at all and just stick with a Glory Maelstrom deck at that sense too. But overall, the deck is very synergetic. You still rely on cards like Alpida. She's also 5 additional K shield, so she's a 10k block, because what I notice is that you want to keep your Maelstrom cards in hand, because you do want to ride with, or you want to discard with Press Stream. So you want to make sure that your quality of hand is good when you're guarding. And so Alpida can help with that, whether she's an intercept or she can guard from hand in that respect too. But other than that, that's pretty much the deck in a nutshell. So you still rely the old school synergy and winning image in a sense, where you do restanding turn on turn 3, rewrite a new Maelstrom to get an additional Excel circle, and then really just try to win that turn with either Karma or Glory. So that's really the game plan.
If you're switching out for stuff like, let's say, Terrific Coil or Tidal Assault, what card do you recommend replacing them with?
That's a good question. And you know, one of the things with Valeria, she could be replaced technically, but you could also add cards like Tidal Assault and Terrific Coil to help her be a final attack in the Karma turn. So if you picture like a Tidal Assault attacking for that first battle and then locking another card, and then if it attacks the second battle, it'll lock another back row card. And then you still have 2 front row Rigard circles that you normally have, and have that one miss. Now you have your third card that's locked in the back row, and now you have a Valeria with a Fencer still standing. And then when the Karma attacks, you can have 2 Rigards that are beaters in that regard too. So there's synergy with the restander still. And so it's kind of hard to make room with that. If you don't want to have to do that turn 3 OG Maelstrom turn, you can probably reduce cards that help that turn happen. So you could reduce Alpedia, for example. You could reduce Press Stream to an extent. But you definitely want to keep Fencer because it's just a good card overall. So I think that would be some thoughts to think about it. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, if that makes sense.
And that is all for this video. Yeah, it's this deck is gonna be one of the top tier, and I'm really scared of even facing with it because I know that Dudley Emperor Reverse does not have a really big hands, and I don't really have a lot of rear guards. I'm really concerned on how the meta game will change, and of course at this point I think it's actually good for the meta game to change because Luar and Gavril has been standing at the top for too long.
I would just say play test and, you know, try some different things. Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just really dependent on your metagame too. And you can really, you know, have the option to stick with just Glory, or you can have the addition of Karma and with some of the, you know, Valeria units, for example. So I think it's just, I see it more as another option to add to your arsenal in a sense. So it doesn't make like an entirely new deck in a sense. So, which is good, because if you already have the deck, then it's just like add a few cards and bam, your deck is updated at that point too.
He's Commander Jaime.
And he's Commadenr.
And we'll see you
in the next one.
Oh, no, on the battlefield.
I took that from Vanguard Insider. I'll do it. On the battlefield.